Okay, I hope you've all received the link to the module.
Yes, we have.
Okay, and I hope you have enrolled. Let me see how many people may have enrolled. We just have a look. So far, I'm seeing 24 people have enrolled. So we have a good number of those who have enrolled. You may have seen I've already put up some reading materials for you in the introductory section. And there in particular, we have 2 ethical cases. Please take time to read. I've also put up a discussion forum, and I'll give you tomorrow and the rest of the week to read through and put your thoughts on those ethical cases. I will be grading that, your input, your discussion on that. So please go ahead and look at it. 2, I also hope you've accessed the slides which we are going to use today. I've not yet put up the study guide. Apologies for that. It's been a very hectic week. I think even last week you all were aware I was supposed to meet you Friday. I went into a board meeting which ended almost coming to 8 p.m. So many apologies for that. So if I can just quickly share my screen, then we see what I'm talking about, what is on Moodle. Let me first turn off these edits. So I hope you can all see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so
Yes,
we have this folder which says reading materials, some ethical cases. So if you open it up, there are 2 ethical cases, cybersecurity and Mary's ethical issue. So take time and read through. They're just presenting some ethical cases, situations where, specifically in the field of ICT, take time to read through, then come to the discussion forum here. It says ethical cases, and kind of make a contribution as an individual on that discussion. So it's taking a bit of time to open. So here is the question. You've been provided with 2 ethical cases in the field of ICT/IT. From our introduction, that is what we're going to say. We see that it is easy to believe ICT are simply objects neutral in their application. So here, if you open it up, because I had considered the introduction we've had on the subject of ethics in science and technology, how would you argue for or against the different actors in the 2 cases? Okay, how would you argue for or against? So ethics is not a clear cut like mathematics where you have 1 + 1 = 2. Someone can have an either or standpoint on a moral situation or an ethical situation. So go ahead and look through and then give your thoughts on the ethical cases. So is that okay?
It's okay, Doctor.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, so let's begin our lecture. We're going to have an introductory lecture today on science, technology, and ethics. Let me just quickly see. Okay, this is fine. So let's have let's have a look at our introduction to ethics. So let me first begin by asking you, what are your thoughts when you hear about this module? What are your thoughts when you hear about this module, science, technology, and ethics?
We'll keep in
What
touch.
comes to mind?
Thank you.
Yes, Geoffrey? Geoffrey, you have something to say? Yes, Ogola.
Thank you, Doctor.
Mm.
Really, from a very, very layman's, just what comes to mind. I think it looks at, of course, it begins with understanding from what ethics means, which could, in my view, look at the morality, the integrity, it is more of the inbuilt, the inner setup of the person that is using technology. So
Yes.
the morals or the personal integrity aspects as in relations to ICT or as we use technology.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
really.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ogola. Chiemba, Raymond?
Thank
Raymond?
you. I thought it is a set of rules and guidelines in ICT.
Okay, okay. Thank you. And Justin, you have something to contribute? Yes, Geoffrey?
Yes, Doctor, I think these are the do's and don'ts while using ICT.
Okay, okay. Thank you. So I think for all of you, you have you have captured the essence of ethics, and we're going to see it's each one of it's a concept that covers everything. There are things like do's and don'ts, like as you said. There are also what would say our own internal moral moral code. There's the personal one, there is the corporate one, then there is the law that governs everyone, that governs the country, and maybe the global community. Yeah, just those simple. So it encompasses all aspects. These are just some of the learning objectives that we want to look at, want to understand. So today we want to understand ethics and basically all the concepts that are involved in it. Two, the second most important thing are the ethical theories that guide ethical codes of conduct. Finally, we want to see the practical application of ethical theories into codes of conduct, especially in ICT management, What would like for me as a lecturer to be able to see is to see you apply it practically. Sometimes we may look at some of these things and we assume, oh, it's simply something for those doing ethics and development studies. No, it's for all of us, because once you deal with human beings, you have to consider the other. Okay? Once you're a human being, you have to consider the other. You're not an isolated being, you have to consider the other and the effect of your action on the other. So I just had this small diagram which shows you the intersection, the interaction between science, technology, and ethics. As we look at especially these three terms in the next few slides, science and technology, you see their definitions can be quite misleading. Quite misleading. They tend to portray technology or science as something neutral. When you look at scientists trying to justify why certain things are done, they make it seem as if it is something neutral. Take an example: if scientists are are testing out a new drug on human subjects, they may justify adverse side effects to, oh, this is in the name of science. We are trying to achieve a common goal of finding a cure. You also hear now people like environmentalists who argue against degradation of the environment, or being harming those things in the environment that have nothing to do with our business. For example, using animals to test new drugs, things like that. And the scientists will say, oh, this is all in the name of science. We're trying to discover truth. And in reality, but when you look at reality, that's not the case. So what we want to see is where the ethical element comes in, because we are dealing with society and individuals. Okay? So let's start looking at each of these different concepts and then have a fuller discussion on ethics. So first things first, what is science? You hear things like someone say science is pure knowledge. Yeah? Those terms saying it's pure knowledge. And that's again one of the things that can be quite misleading. Again, think of a scientist in a lab who's trying to find a cure for COVID. It all sounds nice, but if the process of trying to discover that COVID vaccine or that COVID medication means that something or someone is being harmed. So that relentless pursuit of pure knowledge. Here others call it a systematic, organized body of knowledge. Now, when you look at these definitions, they are devoid of value. Yeah? They are devoid of value. Almost as if science is not answerable for its actions in the pursuit of knowledge. So what the ethical viewpoints argue is that this definition is biased. It is biased in the sense that we ignore the fact that knowledge is generated by people. Yeah? Knowledge is generated by people, which people have biases, we have feelings, and we make actions, we carry out actions which may be harmful to someone. Let's come to the second term, technology. So technology is the application now of that scientific knowledge. Application of that scientific knowledge for practical purposes. Yeah? For practical purposes. And here we find ICT comes in. We are usually applying scientific knowledge for practical purposes to solve a particular problem. Yeah? We're applying artifacts and techniques to solve a particular problem. Yeah? Now, again, we come back to the main question. As we're applying to solve a problem, what are the consequences of our actions? What are the consequences of our actions? And here ICT is a perfect example. The two cases I give you are typical examples of where this technology is being applied to solve a particular problem. But there are ethical dilemmas embedded within that. There are ethical dilemmas that are embedded within that. So what is ethics? Yeah? What is ethics? Sometimes we may assume it's basically ethics is telling us what to do, what is right and what is wrong, which is not usually the case. Whereas we may apply ethics daily, but it's not as practical as we would like to assume. Yeah, it's not a top-down approach where you have, for example, like in mathematics, where you have a formula, and you have a formula which can help you get the square root of something. You know, all these different formulas, but it's not necessarily the same. But it's a guide. Ethics is a guiding tool. Ethics guides. So what is ethics? First things first, we have questions that that rise when we talk about ethics. We say, what makes an act morally right or wrong? What makes an act morally right or wrong? What makes a person or something good or bad? What is it that gives value to someone or a thing? For example, what is it that gives value to animals that a scientist uses in the laboratory? Yeah. What makes a system? What makes a system of value? For example, if you go to an organization and they have applied a system, what is it that gives it value? One can say it helps us to make profit. It helps us, for example, now we are using Zoom. Zoom is helping us carry out our classes, and therefore our business processes as a university are continuous despite the separation despite the fact that we are going to be separated by space. We still can continue to have our lecture. So that makes Zoom of high value. Yeah, it makes Zoom of high value. But can it also be bad? Someone can also look at it the other way, where it reduces value, for example, of physical contact. Yeah, that social element of physical contact, that I may not see you face to face. I may not see, maybe one of you may be sick right now. I don't see it. Maybe you haven't had something to eat today. I don't see it. Your classmates don't see it. That value may be removed because of the lack of physically looking at each other. Yeah. How do we draw the correct conclusion about what we ought to do, or what we should do, or what we should not do? How do we draw a correct conclusion? Now, key point things to note. These first two questions are pointing at a theoretical, the theoretical side of ethics. And one of the things we're going to start next week is to look at the common theoretical frameworks that are used to help, that guide on how we make judgment on whether an act is moral, is right or wrong, whether it is good or bad. Now, one of the important things to note when we say we make judgment, many times when you hear that term judgment, it kind of contradicts the Bible, where Jesus tells us, "Thou shalt not judge." Now, one, we don't learn ethics so that we can judge people. No, we learn ethics so that we can judge actions. Whether an act is good or bad, as human beings, we are capable of making a right or wrong decision. We're not talking about intelligence or making an intelligent decision, but making a decision that is right or wrong, morally right or morally wrong. This is good, this is bad. Take an example, a child, and we actually practice these things in our day-to-day life. For example, those of you who are parents, you teach your child, no, don't beat your friend. They are playing with their sibling or with their friend, their neighbor, and they acquire issues, and then one beats the other. And you come and tell both of the boys, no, don't fight. Don't fight. Or a child takes away the toy from the other forcefully. You tell them, no, ask for it politely, or you tell the other one to share. That is already giving a child a moral code, teaching them what is right and what is wrong, teaching them the value in the other person. Or when you see a child spoiling something, you say, no, don't break that toy, don't break that TV, Don't scratch the car because that item has value. If a child breaks the TV, you won't be able to watch news, or you won't be able to relax and have entertainment. So then now these two, what are the things that help us, the guiding tools, the theoretical or conceptual questions, and those we shall start tackling next week. The third is application. How to draw the correct conclusion. And this is where we shall see, especially on the ICT side, one of the conclusive lectures is how ICT can develop codes of conduct that can help the ICT department and ICT users on how to draw a conclusion on what one should or shouldn't do, what they ought to do and what they ought not to do. Yeah. And one of the simplest things to put down is an ICT policy. Because an ICT policy will tell the user how they should or should not use, let's say, for example, the organization's ICT resources. They give guidelines to the ICT department on how they should handle the organization's information. Yeah, because it is of value. How they should deal with those, with third-party members, for example, suppliers and so on and so forth. So that is how they should make that decision, have a correct conclusion of what they ought to do and what they ought not to do. Here are just some characteristics of ethical issues. Yeah. What are some characteristics of ethical issues? Like, ethics is one of the most contentious matters that can come about. Why? Like, from some of the discussions we had at the beginning, when we had people defining what they believe this course unit is about, some people talked about this is looking internally at me personally. What are my moral principles as shaped by, if I have my own moral principles. When I come to, let's say, an organization like UMU, I'm now dealing with an organization which has its own code of conduct, its own moral principles. Yeah. Then I encounter also individuals with their own moral principles. So now, what is normally common is that we have moral disagreements. Okay? We have moral disagreements, and often these are quite controversial and open-ended. This can be controversial and open-ended. So normally, some people tend to avoid moral disagreements. Now, how does an organization deal with it? There are things that an organization will say, this is our corporate code of conduct. This is how we deal with matters. I'll give you a simple example. If any of you went to IU as a student, if you joined IU as a student, automatically the dress code is going to affect you. Whether you're Muslim or not, whether you believe in modest attire or you don't, automatically it's going to affect you, because that is part and parcel of their corporate code of conduct. If I go to teach at IU, automatically I must cover my head. As a lecturer, automatically I must wear dresses that cover my arms and my legs. Automatically, whether I am Muslim or not. Okay? Whether I disagree, I may disagree with it, but those are the ones that give us commonality, that any kind of discussion is put aside. But however, when you get down to sit down and have a discussion with another person, these things can tend to be quite controversial. I remember when I went to visit my supervisor in the Netherlands, and at certain points during my visit, there were things that when I had to interact with other members. For example, when we would decide, when they would call me, like, oh, let's go for lunch. I remember one of the things that was especially I first really had a problem was I knew that when I sit down to eat, I must make the sign of the cross and pray. Now, anyone who has been, especially in Europe, knows a lot of people don't show their religion, or they are openly atheists, openly, or agnostic at most, at the very least agnostic. So I remember it was really a dilemma for me. But eventually I said, no, this is my faith and I must do it. That's it. At a certain point, my supervisor, who's openly atheist, told me, said, but how can you believe in God? You're a scientist. And I wanted to tell him that, of course, internally I was thinking, what is this man talking about? I am here because of God. I'm asking God for every single bit of knowledge. For him, he's isolated from that. But automatically, because it was a controversial topic, we didn't go deep into it because he had his personal belief, I had my personal belief. So so one of the things about ethical issues, it can lead to serious disagreement. Now, some things can end up being radical or fundamental. Yeah. If any of you has ever bothered to follow the hot issues, for example, in the US, or exactly what is going on now between Africa and the developed world, the issue of homosexuality. You can see we have very radical beliefs, disagreements between the two societies, between the West and Africa. Very, very radical and fundamental differences. Even to the point that it infiltrates, let's say, to the church in Europe, the church in Africa, the church, things like that. So you have different viewpoints, you have serious disagreements. But the question now is, how do we deal with these matters? How do we deal with these matters? We also have what we call moral theories. Yeah. So these consist of a set of moral principles, and these ones we shall start tackling them next week. And these are the ones which guide us to know what action can we judge as morally right, and what action can we judge as morally wrong. Now, again, even these moral theories are as diverse as you have different opinions. Yeah, they're as diverse as you have different opinions. Likewise, you cannot discard either one of them and say, this theory I'll not use, this one I will use. In some situations, one theory may be applicable. In another situation, it is not applicable. Yeah. So we shall have a look at those as time goes on. Now, the moral theories help one to make moral judgments on different moral cases. Just like we said before, you can't pick one over at all times and say, this is mine alone. There are situations where one theory can give a good answer, then another situation where it does not. Yeah. So normally we talk about ethics on a case-by-case basis. What is the structure of a moral action? First of all, we have a person. Yeah. We have a person. This person carries out an action. This action has a consequence. Yeah. Now, how do we make judgment of whether an action is morally good or bad? Some people look at consequences, others look at no. What is the golden rule? Do unto others what you'd have them do unto you. Take an example of the subject of abortion. Yeah, I'm sure everyone has heard about it. If you have, let's say, a situation of a young girl maybe who has been molested, by a relative, maybe the father, the brother, the uncle, or something like that. And this young girl is pregnant. Yeah, this young girl gets pregnant. And someone would argue that, you know what, it's morally right for this child to be aborted, for the baby to be aborted, because this is a child who has gotten pregnant out of no fault of her own. Why should she be forced to carry the child? And another person would argue that no, also the child in the womb, that's a child, an innocent life, who has been conceived not out of their own choosing. So these are different moral dilemmas. Okay? These are different moral dilemmas. What would be the consequence of the child, this young child, keeping the baby? And what would be the consequence of aborting the baby? What constitutes a good or bad consequence? So that is the structure of a moral action. Do we have any questions so far? I've talked a lot without breaking. Yes, Ogola.
Thank you, Doctor. I think when you talk about morality, for me, it comes out as a very subjective matter. Like, it is really not straight. When you look at, just look at the case, what is making rounds right now, the homosexuality thing. In one jurisdiction, we feel, as Uganda, we feel it is totally obscene. We feel it is awful for you to even talk about it. In another jurisdiction, it is normal. It is a way of life. For me, I think the real tricky bit of it is a very subjective matter. And that's why I think even the legislators that are pushing for disbanding of this new law, saying you cannot legislate, you cannot have a law on morality, because it is a very subjective thing.
Yes.
So not really as a question, but I think as a comment, for me, it comes out as a very broad, as you said earlier, open-ended kind of subject that becomes very tricky to deal with.
Yes.
Thank
And
you.
yes, Francis.
Yeah, good evening, Doctor. Mine is just like a comment or a remark. How come you not? I wanted you to talk about logic and culture as you're talking about ethics, because they also sometimes come into play.
Yes, we are going to discuss all those. They are coming later on. This is beginning just to tell us what ethics is. When you talk about logic and culture, there are many things, Francis, that actually guide us on our actions as individuals. Like you say, logic is actually a really key point. When someone says, let's logically look through, let's say, for example, the subject of abortion, the subject of homosexuality, and so on and so forth, logic there seriously comes in. But one of the things, Francis, I want to tell you is that the logic you can see now, for your religion, for example, may give you very clear logic, let's say on the subject of homosexuality. For another person, for example, a younger person, the younger generation, especially now those who are in secondary school, they are just beginning to form their conscience, and different things are formulating their conscience. What we see as logic is not logic for them. Yeah, I'll tell you a story. There was a video my sister sent sent me and sent us to the family group. And in this video, they were talking about another hot topic right now, which is transgenderism. Transgenderism is now another hot topic where you hear people talk about, someone says, I was born in the wrong body. Okay? I was born in the wrong body. And people really have a clear argument. I remember I was listening to one she's an actress. I think she's a very young actress, very good. I can't remember her name. I remember I watched her in a movie where she was playing a character of a young girl who got pregnant, and the dilemma she goes through as a young girl getting pregnant, giving birth. She eventually gives up her child for open adoption, things like that. Now, this young girl, usually these very, very good actresses and actors are usually have this the sexual orientation facing a different direction. So this young girl, this actress now in real life has chosen, I saw her in an interview with Oprah, she has chosen to remove her breasts. And she got so emotional. She said she feels so happy to see that she has removed her breasts. Now, of course, you see someone's, like Ogola said, this is a very subjective feeling. It's someone feeling this particular way, Now, let's go back to Francis, what he talks about the issue of logic. Let's go back to the topic of the video my sister sent us. Now, this one was connected to religion, where there was, this one was an interview between, there was a journalist interviewing a Catholic priest who is an exorcist. And we're talking about the subject of transgenderism. And this priest brings up a case where there was a mother who, as her son approached her, stating that he believed he was supposed to be a girl. So this mother pleaded with the boy and asked him that, okay, I want to send you to this center. There was a center, I think it was a center within the Catholic Church in the US, which she said, please go there. Let them counsel you that if it fails, then I will allow you to do whatever you wish. And these people, of course, now guided, this is now guided by religion. So now when we talk about logic and culture, we realize that what Francis brings, there is somebody being, your moral code is being, it will be guided by different things. There's culture, there's society, there is the social media culture now. So this young man, as they were counseling him and praying and so on and so forth, the priest said they each had a thought of the father. So they called the mother and they asked the mother, what's the deal with the father? And then the mother reveals that she got pregnant and then the father left, the biological father left. And then she met her current husband, who then adopted the boy and loved him. But when she later on got pregnant with a girl, the father now loved his biological child so much. Now, psychologically, this boy took it that it was good to be a girl and bad to be a boy. You see now where logic comes in, that Francis is talking about. Now, you see, on the one hand, somebody who feels they're in the wrong body, emotionally telling you, and you believe it. Now, what Ogola was saying, the person believes this is the right path for me. And yet there is the part of logic. Yeah, the part of logic which may distort something, a distortion within a society may distort the logic of another, and therefore distorts morality. So these are all different perspectives, Francis, and I hope others have picked something from this. But again, ultimately, what we need to understand is when we talk about ethics, not all of us are on the same page. Okay? There is no size that fits all. Why? Because Everybody is at their different stages in life or moral development. We're going to see in the slides that come later. People are at different stages of their moral development. That is, so even when you look at a child, how a child chooses to do right or wrong has its guiding factor. How a teenager chooses how to do right or wrong has its different guiding structure. How an adult chooses, it's a different guiding structure. So I hope we understand so far the discussion, or I may have confused you further.
I think so far, okay.
Okay. Okay, let's move on. So there are three moral theories, and we shall discuss them in the weeks that will the week that will follow. The first one is consequence-based theories. The second is deontology theory, and the last is virtue-based. There are many others, but these are the three core moral theories. Like I said, we shall discuss them in the preceding lectures. Now, one of the things we must understand, there's no such thing as applied theory. Like Agola said, with morality seems to be highly subjective, highly subjective. It's really, someone can say it's really personal, but there are some moral codes which should not be really applied. For example, the right to life. The right to life. No matter what there's no way one's life can be of value higher than the other person's life. Everyone's life is of value. So the term of applied ethics is highly misleading. Number one, it's highly misleading. And no matter what, like we said, now if we say the right to life, and we argue that everyone has a right to life, but if me as a woman, I make a decision to go and have an abortion, whether the law accepts it or not, I will carry out the abortion. Even in my personal home, I will do it. Look at the issue of homosexuality. Whether the law accepts it or not, if someone wants to carry out a homosexual act with another, they will do it. Especially if it's two consenting adults, they will do it, whether the law accepts it or not. They will do it. So there's no, it's an ethical matter. Okay? It's an ethical matter. And it's some things can only be applied case by case. So ethical theories will not give you a clear-cut answer to certain specific moral problems. There is no such thing as a top-down approach. But what they can do is guide individuals, guide corporations. Guide individuals and guide corporations. So we've looked at just some of the examples. The example of euthanasia. The example of abortion. Now, look at the example of euthanasia. In Uganda, it may be very, very strange. You may never hear of it that somebody has asked to legally end their life, has asked the medical people to end their life because they feel their life is not of value. We have not seen such situations in Uganda, or they may be there, but they haven't yet really come out. But you find now in the cases of Europe, I saw a program of what is happening, specifically on the issue of euthanasia, what is happening in Europe. And there was in Europe where they are now legalizing euthanasia, and they are even allowing young children to make the decision to end their lives. So there was a situation where it was a medical situation where a woman, an old woman, was asking the doctors to end her life. So her daughter was looking after her. So the doctor took time. The difference now here was the doctors now, because it has been legalized, those doctors who are guided by, let's say, by religion, by faith, by what maybe the culture of their religions has imparted to them, they decided to take a different approach, because you really can't stop someone. So this doctor approached the lady and asked her, why do you want to end your life? And then she said, I don't want to be a burden on my child. Then the doctor asked her a question that, when you are looking after your child the whole time they were growing up, was your child ever a burden? Then the mother said, no, actually it was a joy looking after my child. Then he said, let's ask your daughter the same question. Do you think it's a burden? Then the daughter said, no, just like it was a joy for you to look after me, it's also a joy for me to look after you. And that moment, this woman who wanted to end her life, she realized the value it gave her child to look after her. Just like it gave her joy to look after her own child, she also then realized the unanswered question, the thing that she had thought wasn't possible. But you see now, whereas the law in Europe allows it, what these people are, what these other, those medical personnel who are now guided maybe by their religion, they decide to handle case by case. Now, it's also the same thing with abortion. For example, in the US, where abortion is legalized, what religious organizations do is they will set up, just like you have abortion clinics which offer abortion, you also have centers which they call them pregnancy crisis centers. And what these people do is handle case by case of any girl or any woman who wishes to have an abortion. They try to approach them and ask them, okay, why is it you want to have the abortion? Maybe the person will say, I'm scared of telling my mother, my father. And they say, okay, can we help you? Can we do it together? Or if the person says, oh, I don't have clothes, or things like this, okay, can we give you the clothes? Oh, I'm too young, so can we, if there's a couple here that wishes to adopt. So they answer, what they deal with is the case by case situation, implying that ethics doesn't have a top-down approach. Yeah, so you handle case by case. Do we have any questions so far?
No question from me, Doctor.
No question, we are listening.
Okay, so let's move on. So the approach to ethical application is usually a case-by-case basis. Usually that's what it is. Although when we look at some of the theories tend to have a golden rule approach, but even then that golden rule approach sometimes can be turned on its head. Yeah. So some of these I have already, the abortion situation I'd already handled that. We also have the anti-theory approach. And here we have situations where they say some things we don't have a criterion for evaluating theory. Yeah. In some situations, someone may say we may deal with intuitive, appealing beliefs or ideas. The problem with this approach is that someone can have an uninformed conscience or a belief system that is immature, to say the least. So even that leaves the anti-theory approach may be problematic at its worst case scenario. Challenges to morality. One is egoism, and that is where the anti-theory approach may affect. Human beings, we are naturally selfish. My self-interests come first. What I want. If we examine each one of us, when we have certain moral dilemmas, whatever it is, our self-interests come first. So we have psychological egoism, where what I want comes first. Look at the simple situation of the environment. Now the environment is a hot button issue. It's an issue that is now very, very popular. We have people who have become very famous simply because they are environmental activists. Okay? But the subject of the environment also comes with a high element of selfishness. If I'll put selfishness in quotes. So I'll give you an example. For example, myself, I'm a farmer. I'm a tea farmer. But I'm not a farmer for the sake of just eating. Also, I am a farmer because I want to make money. Okay? Specifically, myself and my siblings were tea farmers. Now, one of the things that they have accused tea farmers of is cutting down forests to make way for tea estates. Not just the tea farmers, it's even the multinational tea factories. For example, we have one multinational tea factory this side called Tamteko. It has extremely huge tea estates, a large. I imagine they planted their gardens several years back, maybe even 70 or 80 years back. So these ones, their gardens are really huge, which you can imagine the amount of forest they cleared to put up that tea estate. Now, if you come even to the small farmer, one of the things the tea farmers have been accused of is clearing forests to plant. Now, why do we have these tea estates? For example, us the outgrowers. It's for the sake of improving household incomes. Simple and to the point. Improving household incomes. The factories are there to make business, to make profit, which is the right for any business to make profit. Then also to improve household incomes. It's a right for every individual. Every individual must seek a better life. That I want to eat better food, that I want to pay school fees, that I want to have money when I fall sick to go to hospital. So now when you come and tell me remove your tea farm and plant trees, how do you expect me to survive? Okay? So a certain egoism exists. Certain amount of egoism has to exist. It will challenge morality. Let's say for now the morality of the environment. Now, of course, the environment is a small matter. Let's look at other things. For example, let's look at something like abortion. If you have a young girl who is pregnant, she has been raped. She's scared about the future. She's young, she's a child. Maybe she's scared she'll be chased out of her home. There's the stigma that comes with it. The self-interest, that self-preservation interest automatically kicks in. So our own interests usually kick in matters of making a right or wrong decision. Okay? 2, relativism. Now, relativism is a serious disease in our culture, in different cultures. It's a serious, this one I want to call it an actual disease, where someone says, your truth is not my truth. For me, this is what I believe to be the truth. To a certain extent, it can guide you. I mean, at a certain point, you can't force an adult to see one thing over the other. One must make a decision. But then there is truth with a capital T that cannot be denied. Yeah, there is truth with a capital T. Especially when you look at the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are a perfect guide that there is truth whether you like it or not. Now, what if I make a decision and I say, you see, on the issue of the environment, one of the big issues, like one of the big arguments is our big population. So what if I say, let me kill half of the population to save on the environment? Let me, Sheba Nyakaisiki, kill half the population. And I embark, let's say, on my community. I say in our community here in Busasa, where this number of people, let me go killing half. At least let me kill 10%. That is my truth. That is my truth as an individual. Now, of course, here I'm giving an extreme example. But I think Ogola gave us another one when we talked about the issue of homosexuality, where someone says you cannot legislate on morality. If an adult says, I have the right to choose my sexual partner, who are you to come and tell me otherwise? Now, this opens up a lot of moral questions. If someone says, no, 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 it causes scandal, that is true. But then another person will say, what will you then say for a man who went and got married in church, maybe in the Catholic Church or the Anglican Church or the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and where they are bound to have one partner, but that person goes ahead and chooses a second partner, and a third and fourth. Are they also not causing scandal? Are they also not creating their own truth? So what right then do you have to stop a man from going with his fellow man? You see that the issue, the challenges to morality, how they come up. Moral skepticism. And this is brought about by relativism, when you have so many beliefs being thrown at you, especially now with social media. Social media, with every now anyone is a moral authority. Any single person is a moral authority. Even a 20-year-old is a moral authority. You have the likes of Bad Black, who can now throw in also their opinion, and you have to everyone is listening to it. Skepticism comes in. Why should I be moral? Why should I follow this code of conduct? Why should I be controlled by anyone? Why should culture control me? I remember one time I was having a discussion with a friend, and we talked about, this friend of mine is a Muganda, and for the Ganda culture, the issue of clan is extremely, extremely important. And then he raised something. He said that, you know what, as an individual, you can make a decision. He said, take the example for us, the Baganda, the issue of clan. Two people can decide to get married, they have the same clan. He said they will get married, they will go to their house, they will do whatever it is, they will come out, and life will go on. This lightning will not strike them. So for them, they ask themselves, why should that moral code guide us? Why? I have gone on with life, nothing bad has happened to me. God did not strike me dead. I am going on with life. Now, take the example now of the issue of homosexuality. Right now in Africa, it's a big taboo. But believe me, at a certain point in time, it will not be. Right now, our belief of who is homosexual is that man in Kabalagala who dresses like a woman. But tomorrow, a clean image person will come up, somebody whom you cannot point out as being socially unacceptable. This will be a socially accepted person, and they will come up and they will come out clearly they are gay, and they will have all these good deeds following them, and the issue of now homosexuality having a bad image will disappear. And then that moral question will come up. Why should it be wrong? Why should we judge this act as being bad? I remember one time that question was raised to us. At that time, I was at my undergraduate degree. I remember our lecturer then was Professor Carabine. She's now retired, Deidre Carabine. She asked us that question. She asked us a question: why is homosexuality wrong? And of course, then we were very young. People gave answers. They said, they asked, why is it wrong? Then they said, what were some of the answers? If I'm trying to remember some of the answers we gave, we said, because I think we said, no, I think she asked the question, why is sex between a man and a woman right? They said because it gives pleasure. Then she said, but also homosexuals have pleasure when they have sex. Then she said, because of love. They said they also have love. Even a gay couple also has love. The same love feelings two people have is the same. So she asked why. And I remember that time I was in a moral dilemma. I came to a moral crisis where I questioned why it's wrong. And of course, we couldn't give an answer, and she didn't bother. She didn't bother to give us the answer. And I think the reason why she didn't bother was that we were supposed to seek that answer ourselves. Of course, later on, for me, Sheba, as an individual, when I came to embrace my faith more, I went back to the reasons why the Catholic Church teaches why this thing is wrong, why this act, not the person, why the act itself is wrong, and it gave me my moral guidance to that subject. And of course, every individual must seek that question themselves. It's not something that you can ram down somebody's throat. But moral skepticism comes in for each one of us. And at a certain point, what you took as normal, you may decide to discard it. But at a certain point, morality grows. As we shall see, morality matures as time goes on. It's not something that you can simply take on once and for all. Then we have moral nihilism. I hope I pronounced this wrong. Where we have ethical claims that are either fictitious or neither true nor false. Yeah? So this is where you have an untruth being brought out as being true. Now, if you go now, especially now in Europe, in US, there's the argument about transgenderism, where somebody says there's no such thing as somebody saying I'm in the wrong body. And you're hearing some really good arguments, but of course, depending on where the political wind blows, this can be shut down or otherwise. I saw a video of a man who is trying to change himself, become a woman. He was challenging I think a street pastor, and the street pastor, this who was male, was telling him that no, you're not a woman, you're a man. And then this, in quotes, woman said, how can you tell me that I cannot be a man? Only a woman can tell that I'm a woman, that I'm supposed to be a man or woman. Then this street pastor asked him a question. He said, are you a cat? This man said, no. Can you tell what is a cat and what is not a cat? And this man couldn't respond, of course, to that question. Could neither deny nor confirm, and he actually walked away. So that is, so there are some things that are fictitious and they mislead. So error in theories, what we call error in theories. Do you have any questions so far?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, please.
Yes, doctor, actually, so far what we have covered, I thought we are going to talk about computer-related ethics only. I thought we are going to hear things like the cybercrime, software piracy,
Mm-hmm.
financial theft, pornography, that kind of stuff. Yeah, but now seems we are talking about ethical issues, general ethical issues.
Yes.
So
Geoffrey.
why?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yes,
please.
go ahead.
Why did they say computer ethics? It was
Okay.
supposed maybe to be ethics and integrity as a course
Okay.
unit or a module
Okay.
for all. Yeah.
Before I go to answer your question, Maweje, would you like to would you have also a comment, or do you have another question? So I respond at once.
No, Doctor, sorry.
Okay. Okay, so let me answer his question. It's a very good one. We thought we were going to deal with ethics in IT, things like cybercrime, pornography, and so on and so forth. Now, first and foremost, it is for us to understand, like we said, we must first of all understand the concepts involved: science, technology, and ethics. And ethics is a subject area which can be very, very, like we said, controversial. I'll give you an example of an ethical situation that raised in UMO. And especially also it came up again when I was head ICT. I remember when I'd come to teach in UMO 2000, I started teaching in UMO 2004. Then UMO had an ICT policy, and in that policy, one of the sub-policies was that no ICT user was supposed to use the ICT resources to access pornography. So I remember at that time, if someone was trying to access a pornographic, let me start with in IT, when you're in IT, when you are looking at how a program should act. Let us say I'm trying to access a pornographic website. The software that the anti-pornography web software was supposed to detect, and then it would show you, display a yellow page with a bishop holding a crucifix. The UMO does not support porn. So of course you would imagine a student who was in an UMO lab and that yellow page appears, how embarrassing it would be. Now, there was also another scenario. The software was not exactly 100% accurate. Sometimes a user would be accessing a legitimate website and the software would pop up and would pop up, and then it blocks you from accessing, of course, that site. So I remember one time a discussion happened on the staff platform. And there was, at this time, it was a visiting lecturer from Australia who was saying she was trying to access research, some research articles, and the software automatically flagged them as pornographic content. And this was something she was trying to access for research purposes. So she said this was frustrating. She pointed out that this was a frustrating matter. And then another lecturer threw a spanner into the works. He said, "But what right do you have to stop me from accessing my information? If I want to access a pornographic site as an individual, what right do you have to stop me?" He threw a spanner in the works. Okay? So that raised an ethical dilemma. You realize, eh? And this was now ICT. Let me now come also now to present day. We also had the discussion, the time when I was head ICT. Some issues were raised by some consultants management hired. And they said UMU, the ICT department in UMU, had opened up the network that, first of all, students could download torrents movies. And this was, one, it was severely draining the bandwidth with resource. We know we had the UMU network has limited bandwidth, and if you have a student downloading torrents throughout the night, it affects maybe the work of a lecturer who is trying to access research content, for example, or teaching material, something like that. It affects. And then, two, they also said UMU also opened, its network was open that a student could access pornography, which goes against the university's ethical moral standing. So as ICT, we also sat down and we raised our concerns that if we were to apply these, what would happen? So we said, okay, let us say we applied, we filtered the network and we stopped anyone from accessing torrents. So what then will happen? Well, if we stop students from accessing torrents, we also stop them from accessing YouTube videos, which are highly educative. Take an example. When we end this lecture, I'm going to give the recorded material to Emma. Emma is going to upload this to the UMU YouTube channel. It means if then Emma and the team decide to block torrents, it means you also cannot access the videos on the UMU network already, whereas you are trying to stop excessive use, you're also stopping something here. Then we went to the issue of pornography. If you say again, remember the spanner in works that the other lecturer put in. You have students who are adults, they're above 18. If someone wants to access pornography, why are you stopping them? There's a spanner in the works. Two, we also put in another spanner in the works. You have, UMU is a research institution. It's a university which is automatically a research institution. So let us say you have a researcher who is researching on pornography. Because it's possible, it's very possible for someone to research on pornography. And you as ICT, you have blocked. How do you now respond to that? So now I hope I answer your question that first of all, let us first look at the generic picture of ethics. And then where ICT comes in, when you come in now to create your own code of conduct, you first of all understand where you sit in, where you come in. I hope I answer your question of why we are first looking at the general picture of ethics. Because if we don't look at
you, Doctor.
Yeah, because remember we are saying ICT is not valueless; it has a value. Yeah, it has a certain value, and we must understand that it is not valueless. It's not a neutral item. So we must first of all understand the general aspect in which it sits. You have a question, Lamek?
No.
No, you're okay? Okay, so let's move to the issue of social responsibility. Why? Because now we are moving closer and closer downwards to ICT. We are in the business environment. Okay, ICT is existing within an organization. Which organization exists in a society and exists primarily to make profit? Yeah, exists primarily to make profit. But as much as it exists to make profit, it also exists within a society. And once you exist within a society, then you have a responsibility towards that society. Okay? Now, some people argue against social responsibility because they say the purpose of any organization is to maximize profit. The purpose of any organization is to maximize profit. We're not supposed to waste money. We're supposed to maximize profit. This particular dilemma for us in here in the tea industry, we experienced it, especially us tea outgrowers. Right now, the tea outgrowers in Uganda are trying to form, we set up our outgrowers association, and the Ugandan, the legislators are trying to formulate the tea policy. Now, at this point in time, we are seeing the forces pulling. The multinational or the tea factories are not exactly for it, and the tea outgrowers are for it. Why? The tea factories are there to maximize profit. The outgrowers are there to increase household income. We have two differing objectives. Yeah, two different objectives as stakeholders. So you have a situation where you want the tea factories to understand their social responsibility towards the outgrower who is supplying you leaf. But the tea factory wants to maximize profit. Okay? So now you have tea factory owners who are simply saying, I'm here to make money. I'm not here to appease you. Now let us understand the different responsibilities that exist. One is economic responsibility. You have organizations that produce goods and services that are of value to a society. So once that farm produces them, they expect to be paid, and then they increase on their wealth and the wealth of their shareholders. So that is an economic responsibility. Any organization that comes into business must make money to pay back to the shareholders that put capital into it. So there is a legal responsibility. There are laws that govern. For example, the laws that govern will demand that you pay taxes. Yeah, they'll demand, that's one of them. You'll demand that you pay taxes. They'll also demand that you pay things like NSSF. Okay? Then you have the ethical responsibilities. The behavior in society. How do we behave in society? How do you treat your workers? How do you treat your supplier? Okay? How do you treat your workers? How do you treat your suppliers? And the other people in society? How are you treating women within your organization? How do you treat them? Then we have discretion responsibility. This is purely voluntary, where a corporation says, okay, we are here busy making money, but we exist maybe in a society that is highly impoverished. Take an example. One time, Stanbic Bank came into our local community here. Here where I live. And here where I live is a purely rural community. They came in here within the relationship of their current chair of board of directors. So the current chair of board of directors is from our community. He's retiring from Stanbic, and so it was Stanbic and Uganda Breweries. So Uganda Breweries said that our chair is retiring. What can we do for the community where he comes from? And they talked to the community, and one of the things they said is, of course, because we are an extremely rural community, we have no access to clean water. So they said, okay, can we build a borehole? So that is purely voluntary. So another organization can say, let's build a hospital, a health facility. Okay? So these are discretionary responsibilities. Now, if we look at the hierarchy, an organization first deals with these first two. These are the first basic that they must deal with. The economic, because they have to respond to their shareholders, those who put money. The legal, because that's the legal framework within the work, what government demands. At the top level, we have the ethical and the discretionary. The ethical comes first, and this is what we're dealing with. Okay, the ethical, this is where it's a social responsibility. Yeah, it's a social responsibility. Then we come to the discretionary. So this is what we are dealing with at a business perspective. So the social capital, you have key stakeholders who have put money within an organization. But these key stakeholders they also have other stakeholders, the local communities from which they come from. So take the example which I gave you of the chair board of the directors, Uganda Breweries, and also chair board of directors, Stanbic, who using that, his high standing said, I have a local community from which I come from. Can you, Uganda Breweries, and you Stanbic, do something? So now when he used this position, what was he doing? He was enhancing the reputation of Stanbic and Uganda Breweries with the consumers. So tomorrow the local community knows, hey, Uganda Breweries did this thing for us, and also Stanbic. Let us consider them before we go to Centenary Bank, for example. So that becomes a social capital. Let us say the tea factories here in our area decide to consider the issues of women, how women are treated within their factories, within the tea estates. Let us say they also say, let us look at the tea estates that are led by women. Let us consider the plight of women. What happens? They enhance their reputation. So as much as it may seem here that the economic value is the most important, when you also consider your ethical values, it enhances your reputation and your image. What are the benefits of being socially responsible? Directly, when we look at some of these responsibilities, we may not see them as being extremely important initially, but they do something for the corporate brand, the image. They create enduring relationships between suppliers and distributors. It can also help to attract outstanding employees, people who say, I want to work for this firm because of its ethical stand, because of its social standing. It also can create the goodwill of public officials. If for example, government sees that you are for women or you are for the downtrodden, it does a lot for that image. For example, even government can say, oh, we shall reduce on your taxes. Take an example. Government, I know for a fact, government reduces on certain taxes or eliminates certain taxes for an employer who, let's say, for example, provides housing, yeah, or provides healthcare. Simple things like that. There are certain things that give you a good image. Now, also imagine when you create your ICT policy, which is socially responsible, and you publish it on your website. What does that do for your image? Those are small things to consider. Why would somebody be unethical? One, they may be unaware of that this kind of behavior is questionable. So when we have codes of conduct, we publish them and we make them known. You may also lack standards. Somebody mentioned about culture. We have different cultural norms and values. Now, it is important that you have a corporate culture number one, you must have a corporate culture. Then you must also understand we have different corporate cultures, and we understand each one of them. We have different values between business people and stakeholders. These may be some of the reasons for unethical behavior. Now, it's coming to 8, and I'm wondering if we should go further, because especially being a Friday, we may tire out. Can we stop here? And I ask you to look
Yes,
at,
doctor.
yeah, we look at those case studies. You can have discussions as groups, but post as individuals on the discussion forum. We shall complete part of this lecture next week when we introduce ourselves to the moral theories. Is it okay?
It's okay, doctor.
Okay. Maweja, do you have a point?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, please.
Aren't we having a lecture tomorrow?
I was thinking use that time to go through the cases that I've put up for you, and
Yes,
then
doctor.
because they are specifically ICT related, and then I want you to begin to have moral discussions around moral dilemmas or moral issues. Use this time you can discuss as groups, but then post on the discussion forum as individuals. I'm going to grade your discussion, provide a for and an against argument for the 2 different cases.
So, doctor, do we have to provide, what if I am on the against on both cases?
You can provide against. That will be up to you. So another person can decide to provide both.
Okay, doctor.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Doctor, I'm sorry, I joined later. I don't know what you are talking about.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know.
Let me just provide a new share. If you go to Moodle, are you now seeing my screen? I'm
Yes,
sharing
doctor,
now the
yeah.
Moodle. Yeah. The beginning of the module, we have reading materials, some ethical cases. If you open it up, there are 3 articles, but focus on 2 of them, cybersecurity and Mary's ethical issue. Read those 2 articles, then come to the discussion forum, which says ethical cases. So if you open up that discussion forum where I've posted a question where it says, consider the introduction we've had on the subject of ethics in science and technology. How would you argue for or against the different actors? There are different actors in the 2 cases. Jeffrey, have I answered your question?
Yes, doctor. Then we submit where? Exactly.
On the discussion. This is a discussion forum.
Okay.
Okay, so you post. So someone can click on reply here, yeah, and then post their response. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Do we have any other question?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, please.
Doctor, do we have maybe the timelines within which you expect feedback from us? So it's going to be running.
This is open until, this discussion forum is open until next Friday. So you have a week.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other question? Yes, Francis.
We are good to go.
Okay.
Yeah,
Francis,
yeah, it's a small one. Do you
yes,
have any specific text or something that you should refer to, or we only refer to what you have put here?
I've written out some references, and I also posted some articles you can use. So every time I bring up a topic, a new topic, I will post articles and
Where?
other references you can access from the UMU e-resources.
Okay, shall be grateful.
Okay. Any other question or comment? Let me check in the chat room. No, I don't think there's any question. Justin is asking, how will the exam be? It's a take home. It's a take home paper, Justin. But we shall have a quiz. Any other question? No? Okay, I'm going to stop recording.